This is a Tesla 60-minute chart, and this is a Tesla daily chart. So if you move this chart to some previous time frame, when it goes to the previous charts, you can also see this kind of fluctuations of the Tesla stock price with the trend line, and you can see this kind of trend lines enclose this kind of stock price fluctuation very well. And in some price, you see it touches this trend lines, and immediately changes the direction. It was captured in this kind of trend lines very well. So this is April 4th. This is May. So if you moved to previous time, so that's a kind of chart of the real-time data with the stock price. And if you move back to the current time, and right now this is July 1st. I can show you the timestamp. So right now, today is Friday, July 1st. Right now is 3:15. So 3:15. So if I change this chart to 5 minutes chart, so right now it's a new 5 minutes chart. That's from the 15 to 20, 3:20. So that's another 5 minutes time frame. And when it goes to a new 5 minutes time frame, the trend lines of the minimum and the maximum price trend lines are already automatically generated for the next 5 minutes. So this is the predicted or target minimum and the maximum price for the next 5 minutes. So this current 5 minutes, that's this target price and this target price. And right now it's trying to approach this yellow trend line, and the stock price is still increasing, and it opened here and it's started to increase and trying to reach this yellow trend line. So it's a kind of a target value for the current 5 minutes. So this is a target maximum price, and this is a target another level of minimum price, but this one could also be another level of minimum price. It depends on if it can hold the price around this trend line. So right now it was trying to touch this yellow trend line, but it didn't have a strong momentum, and then it started to decrease. So we can see how if it can reach this point. And you can see this 60-minute chart, and right now it's trying to break this yellow blue trend line. So this is one. If it can't break this one, this point could become a resistance. But if it can break this blue trend lines, and then it will make try to touch this another level of the maximum price, and try to reach the target value to this yellow trend line. So you can see right now it's still fluctuating between these two trend lines, and there's a possibility that it may go down to this trend line and trying to drop it down. So right now you see it's still trying to drop it down, but it depends on if many people still want to buy it, or if it still have the good increasing momentum, it may still trying to go up again. So right now it's a fluctuation between these two trend lines. And if it started to drop, and then it could possibly have a tendency to even drop it to this trend line. So you can see for the previous 5 minutes trend lines, it touches this yellow trend line exactly, and just exceeded a little bit, but then it started to decrease the price. And when it decreases the price and touches this blue trend line, exactly touches this, and then started to reverse, started to increase the stock price. So these two trend lines are also capture this fluctuation range very well, exactly for the previous 5 minutes. I just show you in the last video. So that's the previous time frame is from the 3 o'clock to 3:15. Right now is 3:19 p.m. July 1st. So right now this 5 minutes is not completed yet. So it's still fluctuating in this range. So if you know this kind of trend lines, even though you are doing the day trade, and if you know this kind of fluctuation range, and if you purchase, for example, 100 shares and then sell it around this price. So if, for example, this price is 671. If you sell it here, it's $675. So there's a $3 difference. So $3 difference is a kind of a typical range. So sometimes if it has a strong increasing momentum, it may have a much higher fluctuation range. But even though for $3 or $5, if you purchase 100 shares, you can immediately get $300 or to $500 in just about 5 to 10 minutes. So, but you know, the fluctuation in 5 minutes time frame is still is very rapid. So it could fluctuate very quickly. If you don't have this kind of trend lines, have this kind of a tool, then it's have a high risk to do this kind of a day trade or within just 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So but if you have this kind of a trend lines, and then you can combine with some other trend lines in larger time frame, and then you will have a better idea about what the trend it will go, what the trend it will take. So that will have the better chance to make a profit and reduce the risk. So right now you can see when this trend line started to bend down, typically it will show it will have a tendency to drop the price. So just now when it increases to this one, opened here, and then increases to this trend line, it looks like a ceiling, and then bend it down. So it means it will have a hyper tendency to drop the stock price. And then you can see it increases to here, and it didn't break this trend line and started to decrease the stock price. And decrease the stock price when it decreases to here, and this trend lines for the next 5 minutes it's also not finalized, because right now the 5 minutes is not completed yet. So this trend line is sometimes it's trying to increase, and sometimes it looks like it will decrease. So it's also these trend lines are automatically generated. So if it have this kind of increasing trend, then it reaches to these trend lines, it may have a higher tendency to increase the stock price a little bit more. So it's a kind of a fluctuation. So you can take wait for a few minutes and take a look at this kind of a fluctuation. So right now it's a kind of in a transition region, or kind of a battle period between the increasing momentum and the decreasing momentum. And then right now it's still holding in this range, above this trend line. But if this trend line can hold that, and then it may still have the tendency to increase the stock price. But it depends if the next time frame, if the trend lines started to bend down, and then it will have a tendency to go down the stock price. And then it's still fluctuating. And when it decreases to here, decreases to this trend line, so it may still have a little bit more increasing trend. It may have another tendency to revisit this blue trend line and try to touch this blue trend line. But when it increases to this trend line, it will have a more probability to decrease the price again, to to drop down again. So it's a kind of a fluctuation. So based on this kind of a time, for example, if you look at this range, this time frame, so when it drops down to this, touches this minimum price, the bottom trend line, blue trend line, when it touches the bottom trend lines, it will have a much higher tendency to increase. So you see the next time 5 minutes, it was opened here and try to reach this blue trend line, and it doesn't break this blue trend line, but it still dropped down a little bit more. And then for the next 5 minutes, it was opened here. So even though when it opened here at the same price as this closing price, but the major difference is it moved up to this band between these two trend lines instead of the bottom two trend lines. So that means it moved up a band. So it went opened here above this trend line. So the previous 5 minutes, it opened here and fluctuated below this trend line. And then for the next 5 minutes, it opened here above these trend lines. So even though it still has some kind of a fluctuation between these two trend lines, but it is moving up to another band. So when it closed here, below this trend line, blue trend line, when it closed below here, and then next 5 minutes it's opened here below this, still below this blue trend line, but it's because it's moving up to another band. So even, and then this trend line, 5 minutes trend line also have an increasing trend. You can see this have an increasing trend, is moving upward. So that means it will have an increasing trend. So when it opened here below this blue trend line, even though it fluctuates at a certain point in that 5 minutes, it opened also fluctuated between this range, but then it still have a high increasing trend, and then it break this blue trend line and moved to up to this yellow trend line and closed above here. So because it opened below or under increased up to this yellow trend line, so generally this kind of yellow trend lines represents the maximum price for that time frame. So it dropped here, moved up to here, and then it started to drop and closed here because 5 minutes is completed in that time. So when it closed here, because it's closed all around the high price region in that 5 minutes. So the next 5 minutes, when it opened here, it's below that time frame, below this range. So it had dropped down to here and then still started to increase. And you can see this has an increasing trend, and then all this kind of 5 minutes fluctuation is still moving up. So it's a kind of increasing trend. So if you know this kind of increasing trend over this kind of how many 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, about 10 of 5 minutes, that means about 1 hour 50 minutes. So if you know this kind of increasing trend over this many multiple 5 minutes, and then you can start to hold that stock. If you purchase the 100 shares around this price region, that's $666. So if you know it has an increasing trend based on this kind of trend lines, the trend of these trend lines and the fluctuations of this 5 minutes trend, then if you know this still has an increasing trend, then you can hold this 100 shares of stocks. Then if you sell it around this price, or even though you sell it at this price, that's close the yellow trend line, if you sell it at $673, so that means you still make about $7 of a difference. So you will make $700 in this 50 minutes. So this is a kind of a 5 minutes chart if you moved to previous time frame. So all this 5 minutes chart also have a kind of a trend and a tendency. And if it drops, and then this trend lines also have a decreasing trend. and if this is increase, and this 5 minutes trend lines also have an increasing trend, so and they fluctuate between those kind of two adjacent trend lines, either in this kind of a relatively low price region or in that kind of a relative high price region, but typically it will fluctuate between 2 or 3 adjacent trend lines. So this is a 5 minutes chart. And you can see this kind of a 5 minutes chart that's also fluctuated between this kind of a range, between this kind of a trend lines. And if you see this kind of a 60 minutes chart, and the 60 minutes chart, you can also look at this kind of a trend lines and the stock price change. Okay, let's go to the 5 minutes chart again. So right now, and right now you can see it touches this yellow trend line. When it touches this yellow trend line, it generally represents a high price region, and then it will start to decrease the price. And by right now, you can see these trend lines are still have the increasing trend. And this represents the predicted maximum and minimum price for the next 5 minutes and the current 5 minutes. And when it tries to touch this yellow trend lines, it may have a temporarily decrease the stock price. And you can see the time frame right now is 3:31. And right now you can see it has a very strong increasing momentum, and it may increase above this yellow trend line, and you see right now it's still increasing. Then that means the next target value may goes up to this yellow trend line. If it goes to this top yellow trend line, it definitely goes to a very high price region. You need to sell it, otherwise you will see some kind of a temporary loss. So if this kind of stock price increased above this yellow trend line, you also need to pay attention and be careful. It may drop, but right now you can see this blue trend lines. You can see this blue trend line still have the increasing trend, and even increased with this stock price. So that means this price could still temporarily be the low price, because this blue trend line right now could be a support. So right now, even though it represents the next 5 minutes, the predicted maximum and minimum price, but you are doing the investment, so that means you are also doing the current investment compared to the stock price in the next 5 minutes or next 10 minutes or 60 minutes. So you can see right now the blue trend line increased with this stock price, so that means it has a very strong increasing momentum, and this stock price could still become a support, become a minimum price. So that means you may still have a chance to make a profit. And right now, when it's trying to touch this maximum price of the top trend line, it could becomes a maximum value, the kind of the maximum value that you probably need to think about selling the stocks if you are doing the day trade or short-term trade. And right now I can check the timestamp. Right now is 3:33. So that means it's just 3 minutes after another 5 minute chart. So right now it increased to this, and the increasing momentum started to decrease a little bit more, and started to decrease the price a little bit more. But because right now it's still have this kind of increasing trend, and the blue trend lines still changes with this kind of stock price. So right now it probably has still will try to reach the top of trend line. It may battle for another several cycles. So we can see the fluctuation of the Tesla price. And from this 60 minutes chart, right now this is a 5 minutes chart. So if you also compare with this 60 minutes chart trend line, so right now you can see this also have the increasing trend for the next 60 minutes, and right now it is trying to reach this yellow trend line, but right now it's a kind of goes to another battle region. And because right now for the next 5 minutes you see it was started to bend, so that means it will have a high possibility to decrease the stock price. And you can see in this region it may still trying to push the last push, goes to this touches this target yellow trend line. And so when it moves to this kind of region, it's kind of have a higher tendency to drop the price, but it will still have some kind of a tendency and the momentum to still increase the stock price. So it goes to a transition region, and so in this kind of a region, that means if you still hold the stock price, then that means you will have a more risk to see some kind of a temporary loss, because it will have a higher tendency to drop the stock price, to fluctuate it down a little bit more. So it depends. So depends on if it still have the good momentum to increase up to this yellow trend line. So typically, because many people, even though they don't have this kind of a detailed trend lines and the prediction model, but many people, they just see how it goes, how it moves up or moves down. So when they see the stock price is still continues to increase, so they just buy it or hold it. So they don't even know when it reaches to this region, it will have the higher risk. So right now it touches this yellow trend line, even for this 60 minutes chart, and also even for this 5 minutes chart. So that means it will have the higher risk and the higher tendency to start to decrease the stock price. So let's see. And you can see right now this blue trend line is a little bit far from this current stock price. So when it goes to have a big difference, so that means your support will become lower, so it will have a little bit more tendency to decrease the stock price. So right now when it touches to this yellow trend line, it started to decrease, started to fluctuate down. So when it started to decrease, if it decreases to this yellow blue trend line, and if it can't hold it, and then it may drop it even down to the next trend line, but it may still want to push a little bit more, try a little bit more cycles. So depends if this 5 minutes will be completed, and then it will move to the next 5 minutes. Okay, so you can see when it reaches this yellow trend line for 60 minutes chart, when it reaches to this point at the top yellow trend line, the stock price started to decrease. So you can see the next 5 minutes is still increasing. It's still have increasing trend right now. So that means the stock price probably will not drop a lot. So it may still have the good increasing momentum and trying to increase the stock price. So you see right now it's still increasing a little bit more. So it doesn't want to decrease, because right now this trend line for the next 5 minutes is still have a very strong increasing trend. It's moving up. It's almost all 5 lines are straight, almost in parallel, and the increasing trend. So that means it has, right now it still have a very strong increasing momentum, but right now, because it temporarily increased to this top yellow trend line, it kind of goes to the maximum price for the current time frame. So it will have a little bit better in this time price range. And then when it shifted to the next 5 minutes, depends on if this increasing momentum will decrease or not. So it will either continue to increase, or it may start to decrease a little bit more. So you can see for the next 5 minutes, so this is 5 minutes, these trend lines are the predicted trend lines when the stock price is in this 5 minutes trend. So right now it's still in the region. You can see just now these trend lines are started to bend. So when it started to bend, it may have a more decreasing momentum.